Hello, and this is Martha, and I'm with Michelle Dench today, a friend and astrologer. And she and I want to talk today together, just chat about the upcoming energies this month. The month of May is pretty powerful, and there's a lot going on. And Michelle has a lot of wisdom and depth and love that I really admire. And one thing that we've noticed is, not surprising because this is what happens, but a lot of what comes through from spirit to each of us seems to often be very similar, resonate quite strongly with each of us. So we felt like, why not do this together? And one of the big themes that seems to be coming up for both of us is around Neptunian or Pisces energies. And then, of course, we have Jupiter entering Pisces next week, just for this teeny tiny little 2 degrees before it goes back again into Aquarius. And then next year we'll be in Pisces for longer. But so I wanted to drop into these messages that we're both getting around this Pisces energy, and then also talk about whatever else comes up for you, Michelle, but also the sort of contrasting energies perhaps of this upcoming new moon in Taurus, which is going to be conjunct Black Moon Lilith. And so I guess I'll just start really briefly and then you just take it where you want to go. But one of the things that keeps coming up for you and me both is this sense of the oneness of us all, and the fact that we are all quote unquote on the same journey. And we both have this way that we want to approach our work in the world, which I don't find with a lot of people, but is so important to me, which is that we really seem to value seeing everyone as aspects of the divine. And therefore, even though we could take the approach that we are, a talking head or guru, we both don't seem to resonate with that approach. We both seem to want to really interact with the world as what I often experience is like we're each like if the divine is like a gem, we're each one facet of that gem, and we're all reflecting what's ultimately the one truth of the divine. And we both also keep being shown these messages around the need also at the same time, that we value the sense of us as being one and all of the divine. We also both get these messages about coming into our own discernment and our own alignment with the divine, and what that means, and being really clear and really true to that inner knowing of what is right for me in this moment. And then finding ways to constructively voice that and be true to that, and let go of guilt or whatever might come up for us as we're trying to be true to that truth. So yeah, I'll start there.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. I was thinking about the the Pisces energy and just Jupiter moving into Pisces just a little bit. I love those types of transits because what you're getting is a preview. When a planet changes signs, moves just a little bit, and then retrogrades back into the old sign, Jupiter spends about a year in a sign. So we're getting a preview of next year. But it says to me also that there's so much terrain that we still haven't yet, like the whole Aquarius integration isn't finished.
Mm.
And also the new moon in Taurus is such a beautiful reflection of the fixed axis polarity that we're all working with. You know, the Taurus Scorpio axis is going to get the nodes next year, you know, so that is a big shift that's coming up in the next year. And then the polarity of Leo Aquarius, Taurus Scorpio, right? That like fixed matter cross is being really activated. So we have all these things that are kind of priming us. And May, we were just talking, you know, before we started recording about May being this time where it's like we're really making some shifts energetically. To go back to what you were saying about Pisces and about our essential oneness, I think what it is for me, if a guru is a teacher and they're somehow higher or better than me, if there's, you know, it's like, if there's any way that they're different from me, there's something lost in that. Because there's not, you know, God is either everything or it's nothing, you know. So if God is everything, then we are everything. We are the everything of the divine. And that just means that my life is that, you know, unique expression that you were talking about. And what I resonate most with is teachers who walk a path where there's a certain degree of humility that is just the foundation upon which that they live. And I think the Dalai Lama is maybe the one example of a very, you know, it's like he knows he can't hate anyone because he's ultimately hating something within himself. Like that hatred only exists within oneself. And similarly, like if we are to love and to deeply experience love, you know, from inside, it's really just the love of, it's just our own love, you know. We're not, there isn't something outside of me that can give me the love. And I think that's where, like in romantic relationships or in relationships where we can become entangled, and this is the thing that you're also pointing to in that discernment, it's like if I am the divine and I am wholly rooted inside myself, then there isn't anything anyone outside of me is giving or taking away. And there also isn't anything, you know, that that they can do that's not inside of me. So if I'm living in a way that like you're healing everything that you're exploring, like what you're sharing on your channel, you know, the self-love, the repatterning program that you created, like all that you're doing is a direct reflection for me of work that's happening inside of me. You know, and that's why I think when we resonate with people or when they show us something, or even when they trigger us, like they're giving us a particular gift and everything's happening from the inside out, you know, it's like, and that's Pisces in the way that its opposite is Virgo, right? The Virgo, the separate self, this sovereign self in a way, and the Pisces, the totality of everything, the whole of the cosmos. We're working that axis. And I think Jupiter moving into Pisces will give us a little taste of like, what more is there to learn? And especially when it comes to teachers and, you know, our particular.
Yes. I didn't even think about that. Jupiter being the teacher.
The Jupiter, yeah, the gurus.
Yeah, of course. That's why we're talking about that's why we're talking about this right now. Hilarious.
Yeah.
So what you were mentioning before we started recording, some really cool reflections on Black Moon Lilith, which also speak to me about this, you know, a certain kind of coming into your body and having it, being true to your truth and then speaking and, you know, somehow acting on that truth. But what comes up for you with this new moon in Taurus conjunct Black Moon Lilith?
Yeah, I was surprised when you know, suggested that it was I was like, oh, I have to look at that. And then as soon as I saw her with the moon and with the sun, it's like, it reminds me of the origin story from the Bible around Adam and Eve, and how the original God created man, out of breath, out of word, like God created one, and out of Adam comes Eve. But in these sort of original mythologies, there's a original woman, Lilith. And it speaks to the ways in the patriarchal culture that then Eve was, shamed, the whole unraveling of man and woman come from this dynamic between Adam and Eve. But Lilith, the original woman, she was sovereign of herself, created by God, and had her own inherent wisdom and a bit of rebellion. I can see this energy of when we're embodied and we're listening to our truth, it doesn't always mean that it makes other people happy. We don't always gain the approval or the consent of like, oh yeah, you're doing the right thing. Like you might really feel something on the inside that is moving your heart, and you go to share that with your partner and they're like, oh, that's a terrible idea, or I don't like that at all, because it would mean what? Like there's some deeper part of them that's shaken by the choice. But ultimately, our own discernment in learning how to listen to and follow God's will, the will of the divine, listening to the divine impulse from within, comes from actually claiming a place inside of ourselves that isn't always getting the validation of others, isn't always getting the approval that we might want, or those sort of conditioned responses of like, good girl, that's so good of you. And sometimes what we're trying to change in the world goes completely against, I've been really surprised. Don't know if I should say this, but I just been really surprised about all the different polarities that are being exposed. And in particular, one that's been in my awareness is around the coronavirus and vaccination, and rather than like a deep like listening to what's right and true and honoring what's right and true for each person, that actually might be different for each person. There's a lot of polarized opinions. And I started to recognize like, wow, the people I might think, oh, those people are pro-vaccine, were actually anti-vaccine. And it really surprised me. And then the people who I thought would be anti-vaccine were actually pro-vaccine. And I had to realize that my way of looking at it from the perspective of simply listening to what the divine was instructing me to do, and whether there was a true yes inside of me, was actually quite a radical idea, rather than being stuck in polarities about what's right or wrong. It's like, I think there's a lot of interesting things up, and particularly with this new moon, it's Uranus, sun, moon, Black Moon Lilith. It's like, it's shaking the very core of our most comfortable foundational Venusian things with new ideas, with deeper ways of being grounded within ourselves. In my new moon circle, I'm calling it into the fertile unknown. Because there is that element of like, we haven't yet traversed into places that are unknown. The present moment is a revealing of the unknown over and over again. And if we're really with it, it's so fertile, it's so alive,
What's coming to me, is the sense of Lilith being an energy that has gotten squashed, or put aside, or there have been attempts to get her forgotten, or that kind of a thing. So if I think of her as me or us, right, or like, let's say my body, like especially Black Moon Lilith in Taurus, which actually happens to be my natal position. This new moon is going to be my Black Moon Lilith is conjunct my Jupiter at 24 degrees Taurus. And this new moon is going to be at 21 degrees, with the new moon conjunct Lilith. Like, it's just very interesting. But anyway, so if I think of the energy of Black Moon Lilith being my body, let's say what's coming up for me is this sense of, most of us have, if we really sit and tune into our body, we might notice, probably most of us would notice parts of our bodies that are energetically not fully embodying. Like we maybe tend to hold a certain fear around, whatever it is, like our foot that got broken when we were 5 and whatever, or, sexual trauma certainly would be huge, where we might not always energetically fully embody ourselves. And so when I think of coming into the truth, our true sovereign divine truth, there's some wisdom that feels like is there with these energies about remembering to fully breathe into our whole body, and like even our whole energy body. And then if you take it even further, like our body as the infinite divine, really, too. But so that we're not cringing from any aspect of our wholeness. So we can really feel, the totality and the clarity of the truth that's right there.
Yeah.
Something around that.
I can feel what you're saying too. It's like the body is such an information system, and in part of our learning how to really be present, be like, if we only experienced ourselves as the love that we are, fully embodied, fully present, I think for most people it'd be a bit of a system overload, sort of a gradual process of coming into more, and we're conditioned in a way to be disconnected, disassociated, and that the divine is out there as opposed to in here, and that, right. So it's like there's something in that Taurus Lilith energy of actually learning how to anchor inside of this home base that the divine has been given, this particular suit, the Martha suit, the Michelle suit, and being able to actually feel everything as an expression of the divine, whatever it is. I was sharing a little bit earlier, I've been saying like God's love is unconditional, and so that means if like there's anger arising, love is still present, not rejecting. I think of Lilith as being the archetypal rejection of the feminine, the most deep and ancient parts of the feminine. And it is a part that we need time and space of how to integrate, how to re-embody, how to reclaim, our presence inside this moment, this body, and when I hear you talking about each person being a beam of light, it's like how do we reconnect to that awareness within a body that maybe hurts or is uncomfortable, or has some sickness or ailment, or or with a mind that is distracted. Most of my meditation is like spent trying to come back from my mind's to-do list. It's super basic, but just like I remember when I used to do Vipassana meditation practice, they would, used to focus on the like little tiny nostril, breath in, breath out, and then you start moving through the whole body. And it is a path to awakening our full present moment experience of being the divine, if practiced,
Right. And then the other thing that's coming up for me that I can imagine a lot of people struggle with, and certainly I think each of us has struggled with it and continues to struggle with it. But when we do come into that truth of ourselves and that sovereign knowing, to stay in that alignment with, that beam of light that we are, there's a lot of pushback, like you said. And so what I've noticed in myself is a guidance to like continuously just come back to that beam of light, and just notice the feelings that are there for me when I imagine myself staying in that that pole of light that is me, and not crossing into the spaces between us.
Mm-hmm.
It's been really kind of educational for me to even just not judge it, not try to change it, just notice, oh, I feel guilty when I think of not crossing into her space, or I feel scared, or I feel worried that he or she will leave, or whatever, so I'm just curious if there's anything you feel called to share about your own struggles or overcoming struggles with how, I think that's a big part of what a lot of us are currently trying to do. Mm-hmm. Is a lot of us know that it's very important for us to be in that sovereignty and to speak our truth in a kind and productive way. But then I think a lot of us are looking for skills for how to do that. So I don't know if anything comes to you.
Yeah. What came to mind right away was just this feeling of aloneness that most of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, like this is the existential crisis of seeking the divine, seeking the union, seeking the other. There is in the human experience a feeling of loneliness that is really prevalent, and when I've realized, in particular, like in loving someone else, that love isn't actually coming from them, it isn't actually outside of myself. And thus, like, if they pass away, or if they leave my life, or if we're no longer connected, like, there's no way that I'm losing any of that. There's no loss in that. The whole idea of loneliness gets debunked, and that whole identification of being separate, being a separate self, like all those pieces can start to reveal what's really true, and that's where I think of like, oh, I don't have to even worry about energetically staying in my lane, or or her, I don't need to possess another person, or I need, like I can let go and relax. And all of these things are very much body attachment, it's a part of a larger healing that I think on a collective level, we're just beginning. Like the it's interesting, the whole separation that's happened since the early Saturn Jupiter conjunction and coronavirus, and like people, feeling like they have to isolate. All these themes have brought up some of the deepest parts of our human ways of living and being together that really are up for complete reevaluation, and in that, that piece around, oh, me and you, and all these pieces of entanglement where we lose sight that like you are the divine and I am the divine, and if I feel love for you, if I'm just experiencing it inside myself, right? And in that way we're reflecting something to one another, and healing something with one another as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another thing that came up for both you and me over the last few weeks, and you mentioned, I think last week or something, was this idea of when we come into knowing our truth and we realize that we need to let go of something or shift something that we're doing, something along those lines, that we can get scared that we're losing that thing, or that we're taking away something from somebody. Let's say we're choosing not to be involved in something that we're doing with other humans, and we get scared, oh, maybe they're going to feel like I'm abandoning them or whatever it is, or the other way around. But then we both get this knowing that actually nothing ever goes away. It's always, we are all the divine, so it's all right here, and our job really is just to be, the way I think of it, is like circulating with the truth of the divine, in whatever way it's manifesting in this moment for us. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Well, it reminds me of an insight I had many years ago that Ari often references, of remembering the future. And it's basically this acknowledgement that we are the divine, and thus there's a whole perfect complete path that's set out, that we're experiencing moment by moment. The present moment is a remembering of a truth that's already been in existence, a timeless, and sometimes people call it deja vu, but it's similar feeling to deja vu, but I'll have these moments where I realize, oh yeah, I've already been here before. I've already done this, and in that way, I'm free from this fear of the future, and the past is not something that's, not causing any harm. There's just a total knowing that I am 100% one with everything that is. And it's just arising in this moment as Martha and Michelle on Zoom, and then in the next moment, it'll be arising as something else. And that, I think, brings a lot of peace. And then I can keep staying true to whatever is coming up for me.
Yeah.
Wherever that's taking me, And I think that's the similar truth to what you're speaking to, and how I've observed you in your own process of listening.
Yeah. And that we're actually doing a disservice to our role as the divine when we don't listen. I mean, that it feels like we're being selfish in a sense or something, maybe sometimes, but actually, if the divine truth is moving through us, the best thing we can do, the most selfless thing we can do, is to be in alignment with that, even if it means in this moment, shifting something that's on the outside.
Yeah.
And
I think a lot of what's happening in this month, as with everything that comes into our life, eclipses are often, we have an eclipse at the end of this month. We have Jupiter moving into Pisces. We have these big shifts, and they are always bringing us further onto our path and more in greater alignment to who we are, as individual expressions of the divine and as a collective. And so there's a lot coming for us in the month ahead. And I'm really honored to be exploring these topics with you.
Absolutely. Before we close out, do you want to say anything about the upcoming eclipse? There are two coming up, but one at the end of this month.
Well, it's the first full moon eclipse, in the Gemini nodes, where I feel like we're at a critical transition point, because it's also just before Mercury retrograde. It's just as Jupiter has recently entered Pisces. I feel like it has a quality of really clearing out, if the things that we're looking at for 2022, the things that are really there is an element of what I feel in my life right now. If you knew you were going to have to pack home and move, what would be better? Slowly over time, clearing away little things, or being pushed into like doing it all at once. And I thought about it. It's like, oh yeah, Uranus and Taurus. It's like there is a revolution happening. Something very deep is being unearthed, but it's happening very slowly over time. It's gonna go retrograde this summer along with a lot of other planets. And there's a way that there's like a sloughing off of old ways of our being, or sort of our energetic alignment, or our thoughts, our patterns, whatever it is, that is happening over time. And with anything that you do gradually, like quitting sugar or stopping smoking, or, there's a natural process of recognizing more and more, oh yeah, this doesn't really fit for where I want to be or who I see myself to be, and in that, my prayer has become to just become the woman that God would have me be, just like to recognize myself as the divine more and more and more, and live as that, and release the resistance. And I feel like eclipses, like the one that's coming up at the end of May, are resistance releasers.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think of it like if we are each, let's say, take a plant, like let's pretend I'm a dahlia and you're a sunflower or whatever, right? It's like our job again is just to release into being the dahlia, or being the sunflower, or being the dolphin, or being the oak tree, or whatever. So then, yeah, these transits, if we can switch from being, scared of, oh my God, it's going to wreck my life or something, into, wait, no, this is God, almost like being like the artist, like if God is like he's using us as clay, and I want to say, I'm using the word he, I don't know why I'm using the word he. Anyway, God, the divine, is just giving us an opportunity to release more and more and more into being the art piece that we each are. That's such a shift of perspective, and much more comforting to me, and feels much more in alignment with me. Yeah,
it's true. It's a beautiful metaphor, the art piece. When I'm in a process of painting, I often experience that there will be a moment when something lands on the canvas and I'm like, oh, I hate that. It's so ugly, or I don't like the way it looks, or something happened. And it's like, if I keep working with it, if I keep with what wants to reveal itself, what wants to come next, the ultimate finished, painting is beautiful. And there may be layers upon layers upon layers of different pieces. But if I leave it when it's like, just fixate on that one piece, I'll miss the work of the art. Like even that becomes a part of the work of the art, even that becomes beautiful. Yeah.
And to just say like that our struggles and our journey is part of the divine too. Like that.
Exactly.
It's not that there's an end goal of us, quote unquote, becoming pure, the pure divine self that we are. No, we already are. And we chose, the way I think of it at least, is we chose to go through this process of, the struggles are part of that divine dance that's going on for whatever reason we chose to. Sometimes I wonder why we chose to do it. But
I wonder that all the time.
But anyway.
Why is this my particular medicine?
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking. Is there any, I want to give you a chance to talk about what you do, but is there any last thing on your mind that you want to say about that conversation?
What I just heard was like, be gentle with yourself, like as people are going through, some of these transits are really intense.
Yeah.
And I always try and keep in mind that intensity arises for a moment,
Yeah.
And relish in the moments I have in between moments of intensity, and what you were just saying about that everything is that divine, that it's all welcome. The more I live through these big changes, the more I feel to create spaces in my life where all of me is welcome. And I feel like that's part of, our collective healing, is that we find those people, those spaces where then we can really be held in this
Yeah.
change, the great turning that we're all in. Yeah.
Mhm. Like I was saying before we got on the camera, this past week, out of nowhere, I was feeling insane amount of anxiety out of nothing, for nothing, no reason. And there, there's really, really strong Uranus energies going on for all of us, but they happen to be aspecting my chart very strongly.
Mm.
So that's one thing that I've been moving through this week. It's apparently part of my journey, for whatever that happens to be. And you and I both just went through a couple of years of really intense Pluto transits, really intense. And that was not fun for me, but it was also, I look back on it, of course, and go, okay, well, I feel great now compared to that. And I probably partly feel so great in general, other than this anxiety this past week, because I went through that
Right.
already. So, yeah.
And there's probably so many people who are also experiencing that anxiety that you're speaking of. The Uranus and Taurus very much speaks to a viscerally embodied experience of, electrical energy. And,
Yeah.
and like what we were talking about before, it's really tuning us into a new frequency, where instead of identifying with the anxiety or making it or like even becoming identified with a particular story, it's like knowing that it comes from nothing, from no story. There's a space where what wants to come through you, can and will, as a part of that process. And I look back on moments in my life where it's like, now I can see, oh, that terrible thing that I went through, gave way to healing for someone else, or like build the foundation upon which the life I'm living today is even possible because of that which I went through. And it's almost like getting a wink from the divine of saying, see, honey, I loved you the whole time. This is all, every little thing, every little moment has its gift. And, yeah. Makes it.
How often I feel the spirit world just laughing at me, and I'm sitting here going, what do you want? And they're like, oh, you're fine. Okay, I'll trust that. Yeah, and they do seem to be right. So anyway, but I want to highlight, what you are doing and what you're offering in the world. So I know, for example, you are starting a new moon circle next Tuesday, and you're going to be, do you want to talk about that and the sessions that you offer, or whatever else you want to bring up?
Yeah. Tuesday at noon, so it's May 11th if someone's watching this video later on, but is the new moon in Taurus that we were just speaking about, and I'll be having a new moon circle at that time on Zoom, and it's just a really beautiful way to come together, really creating spaces for listening and for prayer and for intention setting around these particular moons. And so with that, I create a little video just for that circle and to prepare in advance. And I just feel like the more we can come together and pray and listen together, the better. So that's available. People can register on my website. And I also do readings, one-on-one sessions, both for couples and individuals, where I look at the birth chart and look at the transits, and in particular the healing journey as I see it, like everything that's arising in our natal chart, trauma that has happened in our past, things that are alive in our life right now by transit, are all reflecting a particular story of healing that we are living out as this expression of the divine. And I love being able to drop in with people and look at their chart. And so that's what I'm currently doing.
Beautiful. Yeah. Cool. Anything else you want to close
Thank
with?
you for having this conversation with me, Martha, and inviting this space. I always delight in our parallel track, So it's really beautiful to be
Very
with you.
cool. Yeah. Thank you.